Americans can't pay the rent. The evictions are surging, and this is a sign that the economy in 2023 is hanging on by a thread. And the Federal Reserve, they better be careful because they're hiking interest rates into a very precarious environment right now. According to Bloomberg, the number of families who are behind on rent, skipping meals, and are having their utilities shut off is surging. And we're seeing more and more stress occur for low-income families in the U.S. economy, especially when we're seeing the number of job openings in America plummet. This is new data that was just announced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The number of job openings in America crashed to 8.8 million in July. Now, this is still above the pre-pandemic level of around 7.3 million, but it's down 22% year over year. And it shows that employers in America, they are starting to cut back on hiring, and very soon they're going to start to increase firing. At the same time, these employers are starting to cut wages. A new survey from ZipRecruiter shows that nearly half of all employers have lowered the salaries year over year for the same open position. I'm starting to get really concerned that the Federal Reserve isn't really paying attention to all this. And in fact, I think the Fed might be almost trying to make this happen, because when you look at the fact that they're still likely to hike interest rates one more time this year into this downturn, which is becoming so obvious, you got to start wondering, like,
could the Fed actually end up crashing the economy in their effort to tame inflation? Because when I look at the data right now, everyone, I'm seeing some very concerning signals. CNBC, they just reported that the unemployment rate unexpectedly rose to 3.8% in August as the government revised down job counts in June and July, with the real unemployment rate, including discouraged workers, jumping to 7.1%. That's not good, everyone, and that's happening as the Federal Reserve is still thinking about increasing interest rates again by the end of the year, and as they're taking money out of the system through quantitative tightening. I mean, folks, this could be a perfect storm of sorts that sends the unemployment rate shooting up, because a skyrocketing unemployment rate, that's what tends to happen in recessions, everyone. You can see today the unemployment rate, it's up to 3.8%. That's still near a record low. However, pay attention historically, like back in 2008, how quickly the unemployment rate went from 5% in April 2008 to 9% in April 2009. It almost doubled in a year. Or back in 1974, when the unemployment rate was at 5.1% in May, and then again almost doubled to 9% the following May in 1975. And if the unemployment rate does that again in 2023 and 2024, with lots of businesses laying off workers and shutting down, that's probably going to send more inventory onto the US housing market and push a lot of owners into a distressed selling situation, which could cause home prices to drop significantly. However, something you need to pay attention to, everyone, is that the effects of this economic downturn and housing crash, they're not going to be felt everywhere equally at first. Rather, we're starting to see the downturn take place in specific cities and specific neighborhoods.
And ultimately, everyone, it's going to be a neighborhood like this, where I am right now. This is going to be the type of neighborhood that feels this economic downturn first, this housing crash first, because in this zip code where I am right now, 26% of the population lives below the poverty line. So 26% of the population is really economically and financially at risk here. And it's one of the reasons why in this neighborhood in South Central LA, in the last downturn, home prices crashed by almost 50%. It was a massive downturn. And you can see since then, home prices have exploded due to, let's call it some gentrification. Let's also call it investors buying up homes, pushing the prices up. According to data from Redfin, almost 30% of the home purchases in this zip code were by investors in the last year. And you can see, this area, it's improved, but a lot of the homes, they still have bars on the windows, right? They still have bars on the windows. And despite that, you go on Zillow and the houses are listed for almost 800 grand at a $5,500 a month payment for someone buying with a mortgage in today's market. And that's just not sustainable. And what a lot of these big corporate investors do is they use neighborhoods like this as almost like a pump and dump operation. The prices here are cheaper, they can buy cheaper, and then they can get more appreciation during the run up, but then they sell out right before the crash, and it gets really bad. And later in this video, I'm gonna actually talk more about, if you're a homebuyer investor, how to understand the likelihood of home price declines in your zip code. To support you understand the economic risk factors and housing risk factors of where you potentially buy real estate. First, we gotta talk about the stock market, everyone. And that's the fact that the stock market is like ignoring everything I'm saying in this video. You know, the stock market actually, when there was the report of the job openings collapsing 1 or 2 days ago, the stock market rallied because it's almost like the stock market is now interpreting bad economic news as good news. And the reason the stock market's doing that is because they think bad economic news is going to cause the Federal Reserve to pivot and to, number one, stop hiking rates, and then number two, start cutting rates. And that's really, to me, the only explanation for why the S&P 500, after going down 2 weeks ago, is now back up to near a record high. It's because the people who are buying stocks, they're not looking at the fundamentals. They're just purely banking on a Fed pivot, thinking that when there's enough job losses, when there's enough evictions, when there's enough economic stress, that the Federal Reserve is going to cut rates and the US government is going to come with some bailout package. And look, folks, that could happen. We could see another bailout coming, because the economic storm clouds, they're getting hard to ignore at this point. And the government and the Fed could always do a bailout. However, if your investment thesis in stocks or housing is that the Fed's going to pivot again and that the government's going to print more money, that's not a very good investment thesis. And I think right now, the Federal Reserve's hands are a bit tied because inflation, yes, it's coming down, rent is going down, but now food and gas prices are going back up. And when you look at the consumer surveys of inflation expectations, they're starting to go back up. According to the Conference Board's Consumer Expectation Survey, they now expect inflation to go up to 5.8% year over year. And so long as we're in that environment where food and gas prices are going up and inflation expectations are starting to go back up, the Fed can't really cut rates. Nor am I banking on the US government doing more stimulus, because right now the debt is just out of control, everyone. Do you know how much debt the US government has? It's nearing $33 trillion, everyone. I mean, that's insane. That's well over 100% of GDP. And the government, they were able to borrow all this money for a long time because of interest rate suppression. But now here's the thing you got to pay attention to. If you're an investor, home buyer, or someone just tracking the economy, is the government's interest burden on the debt is now starting to surge because now they're starting to have to roll over that $33 trillion in debt to the new higher interest rates. So most of the debt before was at low interest rates. Now it's at higher interest rates. And more we're going to see the government budget have to devote a higher and higher share to just paying interest costs. And when that happens, there's not going to be as much money to give to people. But of course, maybe the government does something crazy. We got an election year coming up. The party in power is going to want to stay in power and is not going to want bad things to happen. So anything could happen, folks. But when all this comes to fruition, everyone, as far as lower wages, more people losing their jobs, how is the US housing market going to sustain itself with these record high prices and payment ratios? I mean, this house is on the market for $489,000. You can see it's going to need a lot of renovations. It's 2 beds, 1 bath, 860 square feet in a neighborhood with fairly low incomes and high poverty rates. I mean, that's just not sustainable. And you see actually on the Zillow description, they say, oh, it's a great investment opportunity. But how is it a great investment opportunity if people can't afford the rent and the evictions are going way up? Data from Eviction Lab continues to show evictions in America increasing, especially in cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, Miami, Dallas, Houston. The evictions are well above pre-pandemic levels in all of those cities. So at some point, everyone, the rubber's going to meet the road on income and rent. Do the incomes and rents make sense? Do they actually support the prices? And the answer right now is undoubtedly no. It's undoubtedly no. Like, investors buying somewhere around Los Angeles right now, they're having to get anywhere from a 2 to 4% cap rate, which means a 2 to 4% annual return when the 10-year treasury yield is 5%.
Now, folks, to give you guys some actionable insight and advice if you're a buyer and investor on, where is safe to buy right now, where is not safe to buy right now, I would say this: you should be looking a lot at the overvaluation percentage in your zip code. How overvalued are home prices? You can get this data on Reventure app. The more overvalued the prices are, the greater the chance of declines. Moreover, everyone, you definitely want to pay attention to the history of your local housing market in terms of the unemployment rate. Certain cities like Los Angeles, like Miami, the unemployment rate tends to skyrocket during recessions. You can see in Miami, the unemployment rate almost always hits 10% in a downturn. Right now, it's 2.4%. We know that's not going to last. So if you're in a city where the unemployment rate historically goes up, that increases the risk of big home price decline. Lastly, everyone, if you want even more data on the risk factors of your housing market in your neighborhood to home price declines, hit the join button below and become a channel member. I just released a video today exploring which cities and neighborhoods I think are going to have the most foreclosures in America over the next 1 to 2 years. The findings were very, very interesting. There's certain cities and neighborhoods right now that I would not want to buy in given this foreclosure risk. So if you want access to that data and information, hit the join button below and watch the video you see on the screen right now.